I'm Mariana Evanstein. It's good to have you with us. U.S. Special Middle East Envoy Steve Witkoff is expected to arrive in Cairo later today to take part in negotiations between Israel and Hamas. The indirect talks on Sunday are taking place after Hamas agreed to parts of Donald Trump's ceasefire proposal. The U.S. president urged Israel to halt its bombing of Gaza after Hamas said it was ready to release all remaining hostages. But the militant group said that some elements of the deal needed further examination. In a social media post, Trump told Hamas to move quickly or else all bets would be off. Well, for more, let's bring in journalist Karim El-Gawhary, who joins us from Cairo. Karim, good to see you. So Trump's envoys, Steve Witkoff and also Jared Kushner, are heading to Egypt to discuss the hostage release. What more can you tell us about that meeting?
Yeah, not only them, but we have also Israeli officials and officials from the Israeli intelligence who are coming to Cairo to negotiate. Of course, there's a lot of things to be worked out, even by the parts that Hamas agreed upon. Hamas essentially agreed to release all the hostages. That in itself is a logistical problem. They said they have problems to locate and access some of the dead bodies of the hostages. But then there's also Israeli obligations that coming with it. Like the Israeli army has to withdraw to a certain point, so this is possible. There is also, of course, an exchange deal with Palestinian prisoners, 2,000 of them in exchange in this phase. And there is also that there is a full-fledged, unlimited humanitarian aid getting into the Gaza Strip. Now, all that needs, there is not, the Trump deal is very vague on all these things. So there's no timetables or anything on that. There's no sequences written in there. So all this kind of technical stuff has to be worked out. And I think that's exactly what they're going to try in this meeting in Cairo.
Well, meanwhile, Israel has been continuing its attacks on Gaza, even after Donald Trump urged an immediate stop to the bombing. At the same time, we're hearing from Israeli media that the Israeli Defense Forces are conducting only defensive operations. What does that mean on the ground?
Well, according to Palestinian sources, we had more than 40 people that were dying today in the Gaza Strip following Israeli attacks. In a way, what Hamas did, of course, by giving in to the main Israeli demand, and that is the release of hostages, they are playing back the ball into the field, into the Israeli playing field, because of course, like they didn't sign off the entire Trump deal, but this is probably the most important part of the deal for the Israeli side, also for Donald Trump, and it will create a lot of pressure within Israel, and also it will also pressure Trump to stop the Israelis in the Gaza Strip. So we will see what's going to happen in the next days here.
Well, of course, also on the table is the question of what happens to Gaza moving forward, who's going to govern, what kind of proposals are being discussed?
Well, there's a lot of things that Hamas did not agree upon or just simply didn't talk about. One of them was the disarming of Hamas. There was no talk about it. But of course, what was very, very interesting is that they said, like, when it comes to the future of the Gaza Strip, and that's everything that's concerning who governs the Gaza Strip, for example, that has to be negotiated not only by us, but a wider Palestinian consensus. So when they want to basically involve the Palestinian autonomy in this talk, and in this sense also broaden the negotiation base, basically, they won't make it into a negotiation with Hamas, but in a negotiation with the Palestinian side. And what's going to happen also, what it's announced here in Cairo, that they also will hold some kind of inner Palestinian dialogue about the future of the Gaza Strip, which you can, of course, understand in this framework of Hamas saying, like, well, when it comes to the future of the Gaza Strip, who governs it, how is it governed internationally, who is governing it from the Palestinian side, how are we dealing with the Arab and Islamic troops that are coming. They want to negotiate this in a much wider framework than just Hamas.
For more, let's go to Sultan Barakat, a professor at Hamad bin Khalifa University, joining us from Doha. Professor, the political wing of Hamas in Qatar appears open to Trump's peace plan, but its military leaders are still refusing to disarm. How do you see this playing out?
I'm not sure where the news about the military wing has come out from, because hardly anyone is able to connect with them. In fact, their own political wing finds it difficult to communicate with them, given the distance and the nature of the terrain and the intensity of the war in Gaza. Having said that, I think what we should focus on is the half-full cup that is being offered at the moment. The Hamas, the political leaders, speak on behalf of the movement. They've made it very, very clear that they appreciate the efforts of the Muslim and Arab countries, the international community, and in particular, President Trump, in trying to bring an end to this war, in allowing humanitarian assistance into Gaza as soon as possible, and in facilitating the exchange of the captives versus the prisoners held by Israel. And they also appreciated the fact that the principles declared by Donald Trump do not allow Israel to occupy Gaza and will not allow Israel to displace the Palestinians out of Gaza. Now, based on this bigger picture, they want to move forward. And I think they have the legitimate concern in terms of the detailing in order to make some of those principles operational. They have, for example, yesterday spoken about the complexity of finding the captives, particularly the dead ones that have been buried maybe months ago, weeks ago. They need to find their bodies. They need to treat them with respect, to extract those bodies and then transfer them and so on. All of that requires a lot of time and a lot of effort, and certainly will require a level of security that Israel must provide. If Israel does not stop bombing Gaza, nothing can happen. They will not be able to leave their trenches. They will not be able to leave their places of hiding, to move out, to be able to release the hostages.
Professor,
and I think now...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You mentioned the hostages, and I want to ask you a pointed question about that. Aren't the hostages the one, and I don't mean to be indelicate about this, the one bargaining chip Hamas has? How likely is it they would hand them over?
You're right. I think they are the bargaining chip at the moment, and they probably have been. I mean, the whole 7th of October, the initial intention was to try and capture some soldiers to be able to release the prisoners. But if the agreement goes ahead as originally envisaged by Donald Trump and involves more than 1,000 Palestinians, some of them, 270 of them, were on a death roll by Israel, that is already, I think, a good exchange. And clearly from the situation on the ground, and even the statement that Hamas put out, they start by saying that they now acting out of responsibility to the welfare of the Palestinian people. They see the level of destruction that's been visited upon them, and they want this killing machine to stop. So they are willing and must have been convinced, I think, by the mediators and others, that now there is enough international backing to their position to guarantee a continuation of the plan without having to hold on to the hostages.
Right. If Hamas does agree to demilitarize, what incentive is there for Israel to keep to their side of a peace agreement? After all, Israel pledged to wipe out Hamas after October 7th, and there's clearly little trust that Hamas would stay quiet forever.
Well, yesterday, one of their senior people said that already 90% of Hamas's military capacity has gone. So they don't see demilitarization as a big issue. They also accepted that they will not have any role in governing Gaza moving forward. But they also said that the end of resistance is tied to the end of occupation, and that is a national cause that is much bigger than Hamas on its own. It's something that collectively all the Palestinians need to decide upon. And as far as Israel is concerned, I think the last few months in particular have shown Israel the heavy cost of occupation. Occupation has practically corrupted the very nature of the Israeli society. It is unsustainable. Now the whole world is telling them it is unsustainable. The genocide that they visited on Palestinians has now become an issue across the globe. And you saw it during the United Nations General Assembly, the way Israel was treated as a pariah state. So they're really at the bottom of their presence internationally as a state. They've never had this situation since the inception and the creation of the State of Israel. So it's in their interest now to try and reach an end through which they salvage some of those relationships and some of their presence as a state.
Okay.
And I think they are very aware that occupation is impossible to continue in the 21st century in the way they are perceiving it.
Okay.
And adding to that, I think the commitment that Trump gave a couple of days ago about no annexation of the West Bank, the way Western governments are now going after the extremist settlers in the West Bank, all of that is adding to the pressure in Israel to accept and to move forward with this plan, similar to Hamas. You know, none of them is having their full cake, but between them, I think they could stop this terrible genocide that's ongoing at the moment.
Okay, we'll have to end it there. That's Sultan Barakat, a professor at Hamad bin Khalifa University in Doha. Many thanks to you. Let's get more from DW correspondent Emily Gordine in Jerusalem. Hey there, Emily. So the U.S. president has called for Israel's bombing of Gaza to stop. Has it?
Well, in the early hours after Trump made that demand, we understand that Israel did continue its strikes on the territory. But now the Israeli military has said that it has halted, in fact, its offensive. It has halted it now for a few hours. However, it has been telling Palestinians not to return to Gaza City. The Israeli military continues to engage in a defensive operation, as it put it, and the area still remains a dangerous war zone, as it says.
Hamas has generally agreed to the peace plan, but clearly there are reservations. Walk us through those sticking points.
Well, I think there are three sticking points that are pretty major at this point. One is that Hamas wants guarantees from the Americans that once they release the Israeli hostages, Israel doesn't re-engage into the war, as we saw play out earlier this year in March when Israel walked away from the ceasefire agreement. Hamas has said repeatedly that it wants a permanent end to the war. That was also part of the former agreement. The second sticking point is the Israeli military's withdrawal from Gaza, another key demand by Hamas that it has to withdraw completely. Now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, on his way from the US to Israel earlier this week, made it very clear that the Israeli military would not fully withdraw, but not just that it wouldn't fully withdraw, but that it would remain its presence in various parts across the territory, across Gaza. So that also remains a very contentious point of negotiation there. And the third major sticking point is the question of disarmament of Hamas. That is something the group has so far refused to. Essentially, it would mean the surrender and effectively the destruction of the identity of Hamas as an armed resistance to Israel's occupation. But there are other options here on the table. A previous agreement suggested, instead of disarmament, a so-called decommissioning of weapons, which would essentially mean taking the weapons that Hamas still has and putting them in a depot, in a warehouse if you want, and basically leaving it up to outside partners to make sure the hostilities between the two sides stop. This is something that played out in Northern Ireland, for example. So there are other options when it comes to that. There is room for compromise. The question is just whether the two sides can agree on that.
As you well know, Benjamin Netanyahu has been accused in the past of sabotaging hostage deals. What kind of pressure is he under to deliver a deal now?
That's right. Many observers believe that one of the major reasons for why Benjamin Netanyahu has so far refused to end the war is because he is dependent on his coalition partners to stay in power, and these coalition partners are all ideologically against ending the war in Gaza. Now, poll after poll has shown that the majority of Israelis are in fact in favor of ending the war and getting the hostages back. We've seen hundreds of thousands of Israelis take to the streets almost every week, essentially, well, every week really, to demand the release of the hostages and an end to the war. We've also seen international partners put pressure on Israel to end the war. We saw German Chancellor Friedrich Merz a few months ago publicly saying that he doesn't understand what the Israeli military, what the Israeli government is doing in Gaza City. Over the past few weeks, we saw several Western countries, some of the major allies of Israel, recognize a Palestinian state in order to push the Israeli government to engage in a meaningful political resolution of the conflict. But what crucially has been missing is pressure from the Americans, from President Donald Trump himself, the US being Israel's most important partner. And now we're seeing that pressure applied, and that is what's making the important, the crucial difference here now.
DW correspondent Emily Gordine from Jerusalem, thank you.